Welcome everyone to the Mead and Honey tasting hosted by the MIT Club of Boston. My name is Kevin McCumber. I'm MIT alum, and it's my pleasure to host this event. I want to give a couple thanks to folks for helping to make this possible. First, to our fellow alum, Margaret Wong. She knew about this mead and connected me to the presenters tonight. So thanks to Margaret for making that connection. And also want to thank Ash and Amina, our presenters tonight, and the staff at Sap House Meadery for putting together a program and a really wonderful bespoke honey and mead tasting kit. Ash, Amina, I'll tell you, I know next to nothing about both of them. All I know is that mead is made from honey and honey can be made into mead. So I'm really looking forward to hearing this as well. It's not too often that I really just go into one of these events completely blank on what we're going to be tasting. So just a quick idea of the rundown for the program tonight. We'll be doing the presentations from Ash and Amina along with the tastings. We'll be able to do questions as we go along. If you want to ask a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and we'll call on you to ask your question in real time. And then at the end, somewhere around 8:15 or so, if time allows, we'll go to breakout rooms. So this is a great opportunity to socialize, mingle a little bit with the other attendees in small groups as if we were together at a tasting. And then we'll plan to wrap up around 8:30. And after that, it'll just be a free time that Ash and Amina can stick around a bit and socialize with us, just a low pressure chat about whatever type of environment. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Ash Fishbein and Amina Harris. Ash is the co-founder and mead maker at Sap House Meadery in Ossipee, New Hampshire. And Amina Harris is the director of the Honey and Pollination Center at the Robert Mondavi Institute at UC Davis. And she is the owner of Z Specialty Food. It's a pleasure to have you both with us tonight. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ash Fishbein. Born and raised up here in cold Ossipee, New Hampshire. I'm sitting in our production space, and you may see some staff members come in and out and go behind me. We have a pub here as well, so you might see some folks coming through behind me. So a little bit about who I am and what we do here. My cousin Matt and I started Sap House Meadery back in 2009. And it was, at that point, a big hobby for me. It began back in high school. I had started making beer in 10th grade. I wasn't old enough to buy it, so I learned how to make it and became quite industrious that way. And in 11th grade English lit class, I learned about mead, reading Beowulf. And that's where I learned that you can make mead from honey. And before I get too far into the story, you should all have your mead opened, I hope. And I welcome you to enjoy this traditional mead. This will be the first one. We're going to start with the simplest one here. And this is made with wildflower honey, water, and yeast. And I'll get into how we make that. But I figured while I'm chatting, you folks might as well be enjoying it. So I learned how to make this wonderful beverage out of honey and water back in 11th grade. And from that point on, I was hooked. Google barely, I don't even think existed. I think it was Ask Jeeves at that time. And we could only source meads, every so often. It really wasn't very often. And so I ran this as a hobby, producing it for friends and family. And then in 2009, this building that we're in came up for sale, and Matt and I were sitting down at Christmas dinner with my folks, and we decided that maybe it'd be a good idea to get this started. And while I do this, I'm going to share my screen and just show some pictures here and a couple slides.
Hey, Ash, just a quick question. We had one in the chat. What kind of glass would you recommend for this first one?
Well, you'll find as we get going, mead really has no rules, but I enjoy mine in a snifter. You can easily enjoy it in a wine glass. There are session meads out there, low ABV carbonated meads that are just as good in a pint glass. But I personally like a snifter where you can swirl it and you can get some great aromatics there while you enjoy it. So we started this company in 2009 after purchasing the building, and we built this company on what we call the triple bottom line. Matt and I, being born and raised in this town, wanted to be a catalyst or a spark to revitalize it. Ossipee has succumbed to the typical woes of New England towns being bypassed by major highways, having the reduction of trains coming through, and so on and so forth. So after decades of stagnant economics, we wanted to be the catalyst and the sparks to recreate a community that was, starting to drive people here. So our business model was this triple bottom line. And what that is instead of just profits and focusing solely on that, we focus on community, sustainability, and then profit. So the community aspect and what we've done is once we got this up and off the ground, we developed the Ossipee Economic Development Council. We ended up sourcing funds through grant money, working with other EDCs in our area, and we've now installed sidewalks in our town, which was something that we didn't have. Kids can now walk safely to school. We have a big, huge, beautiful playground that we've also installed, and we've got other things that we're working on, like rail trails and such. So we're really trying to steep ourselves into the community and its fabric. The sustainability side is that everything that you enjoy tonight is either locally sourced or fair trade and organic, or sustainably harvested or unique in some such way. Tonight, it's going to be the honeys that we use in the pairing of oak barrels. But it's really important for us to support our local farmers, apiaries, sugar shacks like maple syrup shacks and things like that, and utilize whole ingredients wherever possible. And then lastly, of course, we have to be fiscally responsible and sustainable, so we do have to drive a profit as well. But all those things being told, every sip you take here, these three components are what has driven us to create what it is that's in your hand.
Ash, can you just hit the play button there?
Yeah, sorry about that. So we bootstrapped it in the beginning. That's our building there. You can see with the arrow and the trees painted on the side. We've got a beautiful lake in the background. We really have no sidewalks, nothing going on. This is pre the production building that I'm sitting in. That red maroon roof there is actually where I am, but that building has been essentially torn down and rebuilt, and where I'm sitting. Everything we've done through our remodels have always been, low carbon footprint in mind. So that's a little part of our town. There's my cousin Matt and I. He was 22 when we started. I was 29. Over time, we've built, a great following. We've really worked hard again to be a part of our community. So we do a lot of different tours, a lot of different events here. And when we renovated again in 2015, we installed a pub. So now you can come in and you can have cider, beer, wine, non-alcoholics, our meat, of course, and then a whole list of food that we enjoy producing. We do full-on tours. You can see in the top corner there, we've made dandelion mead. That's been a big thing that we've done. It's just a great way to show people that you can do it even at your home and as a hobby. Let's see. So we've renovated. There's the building now. You can see some of the oak barrels that we use. I'm sitting in front of a couple of those tanks as we speak. And the way that mead is made, quite simply, is it's a mixture of honey and water, and we add a cultured wine yeast to that. And that yeast goes in, and it metabolizes the sugar, creating alcohol and CO2. And that takes about 2 to 3 weeks. And once that's complete, we use a clarifier to settle the solids. We transfer that liquid over into either oak barrels, stainless tanks, glass vessels. We even use plastic, you can see there. And there's reason for that, which I can get into later. And we let it age. If it's a still mead, like the ones that you're drinking right here, they're typically aged a minimum of 6 months, but a lot of them age much longer than that. And then we do a session style mead, which is carbonated, low ABV, and we typically, those turn out every 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks. Again, we renovated in 2015, and there's just a snapshot of our little pub. It's a very small space, but we do have an outdoor patio that we put out in the summer. I wouldn't go out there now. We've got about 4-foot snow bankings out there, but we always welcome people to come in. We have live music from time to time. We're always serving food, and we try to just become that community hub where people can come, hang out, have meetings, do their work, what have you. And that's been a great success here. Just another shot. We do like to make mead cocktails. I'm sure tonight, actually prior to tonight, I was asked many times, how do I drink it? Should it be chilled? Should it be? And I say it repeatedly, there are no rules. I feel like all the other beverages have plenty of those, and we don't need to do that. With mead, you can enjoy them over ice, chilled, warmed, mulled with spices, and mixed into cocktails. And we do all of that. And I can certainly help with coming up with ideas as well if you're looking for them. So there's a few mead cocktails right there in that picture on the right.
Could I have the one in the little low glass?
This one, with the lime on it?
Yeah.
That is our hopped blueberry maple with tonic water and a lime. It's a play on a gin and tonic. And it's really, really fun. It's great mead. Again, we do food here. We do charcuterie boards, tapas style tacos, burgers. We even do pizzas now. But we're always changing things up as we go. So while you're enjoying that mead, over time, I've been lucky enough to meet Amina Harris and the team over there at UC Davis. And recently, they've been working on a new wheel. Of course, in your package, I should probably go over what you received. You should have received the honey wheel, the 3 honeys, numbered 1, 2, and 3, the tasting spoon, and Amina will discuss why you use that spoon and not wood or metal. And then, of course, the 3 meads. And then you should have gotten a little letter with an awesome little coupon code under there. Highly recommend using that. And then Amina and her son have a company called The Hive and Z Specialty, and they also have a little gift card in there as well, or a discount card in there as well. I hope you'll use that. But with your pack, you got a honey wheel. But what UC Davis also worked on is the traditional mead aroma wheel, where they utilized, I think it was, I don't know how many meads you received, but I think they ended up with 75 different aromas. They had 5 basic tastes, which are right there, savory, fruity, things like that. And they had 6 mouthfeels, and they have come up with this awesome wheel that you should be able to, when you're sipping on this traditional mead, maybe you can get some of those flavors that are, or aromatics that are on there. When we do our tours and tastings here, people are always reluctant to share what they smell or what they taste for fear of being wrong. And it's wildly subjective, and you really can't be wrong because we're all very, very different. And I always welcome people to share with us what it is they are tasting or smelling. But sometimes people have a hard time deciphering what it is they're tasting. And pardon the pun, they say, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. What is that? It's on the tip of my tongue. I feel I'm a big collector of wheels. I have oak barrel wheels. I've got even vanilla wheels, fruit wheels. I love collecting wheels. And the reason for that is I love to build my vocabulary. And I think that is where people get hung up. So these wheels come in really handy because it might spark that word that you're looking for and digging for while you're tasting or smelling something. as we're doing this, is there any flavors or aromatics that we're getting off the traditional mead? Yes, someone says it looks different. Yes, this one is not available as of yet, but will be soon. This is the honey wheel that you did receive, and we'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to show you this one because it will be coming out. Amina can speak to its availability. I don't believe it's currently available, and if it is, it's probably newly available.
Amina, do you know when this wheel will be available?
Yeah, I'm just writing that in the,
Oh, okay.
sorry. So this is what happens when we start doing this. So this wheel is not ever going to be printed and sold. It is an open source product that KSEN made as a master's program. And the reason it won't be sold is because it's open source. Whereas the honey wheel is under copyright from the university because income from it goes to help be research on campus. So there's two different aspects, and it makes it really nice. But she did the whole 9 yards to pull this off. And we'll talk a little bit about how you create a flavor wheel like this when I get going.
Great, thank you.
Someone found the honeysuckle in there. It's definitely in there.
Yeah, I just scrolled while you were talking in there. Yeah, I mean, I was surprised to see the honeysuckle. I see fruity, hint of citrus. Sure, all great descriptions. How long is an open bottle good for? So open bottle, you can put the cork back in, throw it in your fridge. It's good for a few weeks, easy. It's a little bit more shelf stable than a red or a white wine. I always recommend vacuums if you have the cork that you can put in and vacuum the air out. If you do that, it's good nearly indefinitely. So
you can't do a master's on flavor wheels. You can do a master's in sensory science.
Awesome. 0 tannins. That's interesting. Yeah, there's not a lot of tannins. We do add post-fermentation, pre-bottling. We do add a little bit of tannin in there, but it's very subtle. It's not what you would expect from a grape wine. We do acid adjustments as well. I tend to use malic and tartaric acid to adjust those. I always tend to look at mead as trying to be multi-dimensional, playing with the tannins, the acidity, and the sweetness. And of course, alcohol lends a big hand to all of that too, because it can increase the perception of acidity, even though that's not what's going on. It's almost an amplifier. But yeah, good call on that. Nice. So with that being said, just to keep things moving along, I'd like to take a moment. We're going to kind of go back and forth here, but I want to take a moment and introduce Amina. I've known Amina now for about 7 years. She's the director of the Honey and Pollination Center at UC Davis. She's also the co-owner of Z Specialty Foods and the newly launched The Hive, which is out in, remind me again, Amina?
Woodland, California.
Woodland, California.
Than Ossipee.
Yes, a little bit. So I'd like to hand it over to Amina, and away you go.
So what we're going to do is first we're going to taste some honey. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do that. And the honey we're going to taste is that which is inside your the mead that you're tasting right now. And then we're going to come back and taste the mead so you can see where the honey is expressing itself versus things like the barrel and other types of stuff. So the first thing you got, we got someone from Sacramento. Look at that. Well, then you need to come by the Hive, which is just on I-5 up the road, 10, 15 miles, depending where you live in the city. So this is the honey wheel. You all have a copy of it. I'm going to just let you know right now, please do not take a picture of it tonight in full and put it on the web because, as I mentioned, could you advance on to the next slide, Ash? Because I think that's that one. So notice that I put a little line through it so that you can't get a full phrase with it. The idea is that if you do that, people don't have any reason to purchase the wheel. We're trying to encourage them to purchase the wheel. But to give you an idea, when you put something like this together, we used 25 people from across the tasting spectrum. There were approximately, there were people who were from the world of wine, cigars, chocolate, olive oil. There were chefs, there were writers, there were beekeepers, all kinds of different people. We had 25 honeys from around the world. And we, in a controlled environment where all the honeys were at exactly the same temperature, we all tasted these honeys and they described them. There were way more words than you have here. There are actually 99 words on this wheel. And it's exactly what the Ash said. The idea is that we need words to describe honey. People think about honey and they say, oh, well, it tastes like honey, because they can't parse out all those different kinds of flavors and aromas that are happening. So when we're tasting honey, we all know that honey is pretty viscous, it's thick. Sometimes it's crystallized, that's fine. We don't want to change it from its crystalline form in this format. We want to get it as warm as we can. So you take this little cup that Ash sent you, number 1, and we're going to warm it on our hand by rubbing it this way and encircling it and keeping your hand warm. Your body temperature at 95 degrees is just about the temperature that a beehive is on the inside in normal weather. Out here in California, beehives get up to 125 degrees inside. Ideally, you don't want your honey, when it's being processed, you want to keep your honey below 120 degrees if you can. Things like enzymes and pollen and color and some of the aromas will start to break down if it gets up to 140, 160 for pasteurization. So when you're making something as delicate as mead, you really want all the flavor and all the aroma to come through. So if you think you finally have yours warmed up, I want you to take the top off and take a sniff. And take your spoon, you can stir it in there, sniff again, get as much flavor as you can, put a little bit on the spoon. By the way, I mentioned to Ash, a lot of people say, oh, but plastic isn't biodegradable. Well, this happens to be a compostable plastic spoon. I prefer plastic because it has no flavor. Metal has a flavor that it imparts to the honey. Wood, you have to learn how to take away the wood flavor that's in there to actually taste. When I'm in a huge group, I taste with wooden stirrers from coffee. So just take a little bit. Let it roll around in your mouth. This is a really, really fruity and floral honey all at once. And that's what I love about wildflower honeys, is when you look at these, you're going to find this information. Here's your floral. In this case, you can actually taste the appley flavor. So that's over in the fruity line, which is all these different kinds of fruits showed up. You get a little hint in the back of the honeysuckle that someone mentioned, and then the aftertaste starts to go into a bit of the lilac, almost like you're sucking the back of of honeysuckle or lilacs, if you ever did that when you're a kid. People in California don't tend to do that, but I'm an East Coaster from the beginning, and I can remember sucking that a lot. So it really changes. The whole thing inside your mouth is going to change. Now we're going to go back and taste the honey, the mead again, and I'm going to turn it over to Ash and let him take it on.
Thanks, Mina. Yeah, so you mentioned lilac. I get lily, it reminds me of white flowers. I don't know, I get a vision in my mind. I get fruity esters as well. So this mead, again, it's just honey water fermented 2 to 3 weeks, and then bulk aged for about 6 to 8 months. It doesn't mean you won't get that breadiness. I saw someone say that they had that in there. That can very much be in there.
So
Yep.
I'd almost say when I think about what they're calling yeasty, and it is sort of, there is some of that warm yeasty kind of flavor. It isn't, it's more, boy, it's almost like you're eating toast, or not toast, but you're actually getting that effect of like a whole wheat bread kind of thing. And then when you pay attention, your mouth gets coated in this really, really interesting thing happening on your tongue. One of the pieces of sensory science is to pay attention to the effect on your tongue. You know, it's not just your tasting isn't just what's happening inside your nose, it's also tactile. And in this case, the tactile piece is your tongue. It's also visual. Look how beautiful this is.
I also get a little minerality in there. I tend to get that with a lot of meads. I'm not quite sure where that is lent from, but it can be from the honey itself. But yeah, someone's asking what's the classic grocery store honey. Usually it's clover or orange blossom. You'll see those out there. Clover has a really distinctive cinnamon, savory spice, baking spice flavor. And all of these flavors can change seasonally. You know, one thing with New England and New England wildflower honey is that we have a very short pollination season, unlike California that can pollinate all year long. So we have a short window of time, and we have a lot of wildflowers that kind of run that spectrum throughout the season. So up here, what I've always noticed is that spring honeys are typically lighter in color, more of that floral character. And then as the summer progresses and into the fall, they actually get darker. And I almost get squash blossoms from those darker honeys more often. Vegetal, things like that. Apple blossoms are very abundant up here. We have a big apple industry. So you'll end up getting some of those flowery notes. You know, when we say, oh, it's orange blossom honey, it doesn't mean you're going to get oranges. Typically, a California orange blossom honey is going to give you more of a jasmine flavor, whereas a Florida honey is a little bit more like its climate. It's actually a little more subdued, maybe dank, and not quite as vibrant in that jasmine category. It does. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that Ash mentioned was that the supermarket honey, the clover that you usually see, there are three standards on a supermarket shelf. There's wildflower, clover, and orange blossom. Those seem to be the standard, except they change according to where you're located. So occasionally, you know, like if you're in Florida, you might get Tupelo sitting on the shelf. If you're in, you know, it sort of just depends. But generally, those are the three you see. What you need to understand is that there is no rule and regulation about naming a honey. So when you see a honey that says it's clover honey, first of all, there's lots of different kinds of clover. There's red, there's white, the little kind you see on the East Coast, the little low stuff. There's sweet clover that you get from all over the Midwest, the High Plains area, the Dakotas, Montana, a little bit from Colorado, and some of the really incredible white clover, very similar in flavor, totally different flavor profiles. It's not the red clover that we grow for cows and pasture. It's a very, very different clover. But when you're blending, and the big packers blend their honeys, the predominant floral source is all that can be put on the label. And that predominant floral source might be less than 20%. You know, as long as there's some cotton at 18%, alfalfa at whatever, another 18, you could go through a whole lot of really simple honeys and then some wildflower, mix it all together and call it clover, and then swap the clover out and put in orange blossom and call it orange blossom. And that over the years has given honey a really bad name because people say, oh, all honey tastes the same. Well, when you do it that way, it does. Because predominantly everything else except that little bit of orange blossom or clover is the same. So that is really an important thing to know. It's if you want to have a good varietal honey, you need to buy it from a reputable packer who isn't going to blend. I have to say that's what my business does. But, you know, I have to always be changing two hats. It depends who I am and where we are. Has the climate change affected the quality and amount of honey you are harvesting? My business buys honey from all over the country. And the answer to that is I'm not harvesting it, but yes, it has affected the honey. In some cases, simply because of quantity. There isn't as much being produced because there aren't as many flowers because it's so dry. So this is an issue internationally for bees in general.
So
out here I should be looking at?
I could go through a couple of them. So number one is number one honey is wildflower honey, New England wildflower. And it is the same honey that is in the traditional mead that you are drinking.
Okay,
One thing that oh, sorry, Amina.
No, go.
One of the things that I always found very interesting is on the labeling side of honey, you know, obviously that's the biggest part of our business. We purchase about 4,000 pounds of honey a month here at Sap House. And through that, it's really about, as Amina said, finding the proper and most respectful and respectable packers that you can find. I've always partnered up with Amina. I know that I've been to her warehouse and where they do that. But we also run those same rules here. So any locally sourced ingredient that we use, we go out and we meet those farmers, those apiaries, those Sap House people, and we really build relationships with them to ensure that they are sustainably farming, sustainably harvesting, and keeping on that quality. We really believe, you know, quality in equals quality out, and that's a big part of what we're doing and what we do here. But one of the things that I found interesting through my years with working with honey is that the regulation of labeling is really non-existent in this country. And one interesting test that I find I just shake my head at, to be quite honest, is if you ever see organic honey, if it says organic on the label, it's not from America. American honey, United States honey cannot be labeled organic, but any honeys from outside this country can. So it's really an easy way to determine where that is from. Another way you can tell, they've worked as best they can to keep the trust of honey producers and packers. They've instituted a program called True Source. And if you look on the back of some of your honey containers, you might see a little emblem that says True Source Honey. And what that is FDA or certain inspectors are at each port where that is being transferred. And they're ensuring that that honey came on as honey and it's leaving as honey, so that it's not either being counterfeited or adulterated. Years ago, I don't know what the stats are now, but years ago, honey was the most counterfeited food in the country. There have been people that have gone to prison for adulterating it and selling it as honey. But it's one of those things that has always been a counterfeited food, and you always want to make sure you know where it's coming from. So locally sourced farmers markets, things like that are always a great source for those honeys.
So I'm going to address Whitney, and then parenthesis, and Lyndon and whatever 10M are, whose two favorite honeys are chestnut and meadowsweet. Most people don't know about meadowsweet. It's not really heavily produced. And it's so interesting because meadowsweet is incredibly floral, and chestnut, it smells like, on the smell, is wet leather on a horse, but is followed with a really incredible floral taste. So I find it interesting that you have these two almost divergent honeys as your two favorites. Kind of intriguing. That's just a comment. So one of the things is we're going to move on, and we're going to, there's a question about how much honey do you need per volume of mead? Want to answer?
Yeah. So real simply, if you're to do this at home, a great easy math equation, if you're looking to produce mead on a 5-gallon scale, if you're just doing a 5-gallon bucket of mead, typically the amount of pounds of honey you use oftentimes correlates, if fermented well, to the ABV that you will get. So if you have a 5-gallon batch that you want to make and you put 12 pounds of honey in there, you're looking at about a 12% ABV mead. And that's just a rough, bar napkin sketch of what you're looking at. Not trying to get too deep into it. We range. I mean, the tank behind me is a 250-gallon tank. In that tank, we typically make one of two meads. It's either a dry traditional, like the one you've had tonight, and that's 600 pounds of honey in a 250-gallon batch. So that's a good amount of honey. That's 10 5-gallon buckets. So 50 gallons, about 20% volume, give or take. Yep, there's roughly 18 pounds of honey. If I were to make that in a 5-gallon batch, you're actually looking at, because there's residual sweetness, there's probably about 20 to 22 pounds of honey. If I were to do that in a 5-gallon batch, and I would ferment out roughly 18 to 18% ABV on that. That's correct. Yep. Yeah, that's vanilla bean mead is a very expensive mead for two reasons. Honey and vanilla beans are wildly expensive. Someone asked, I think I missed that. Someone just asked a second ago. My mouse has disappeared. Hang on a second. There's my mouse. Let's try that again. Nope, it disappeared again.
The vanilla bean mead is so good and you get drunk fast. Have I ever had vanilla bean mead?
So yeah, someone asked about, I keep mentioning maple houses. Yeah, so when I started the company in 2009, I had been looking for investment since 2007. I had produced a maple syrup mead, which is maple syrup and honey, back in 2003 and 4. And going through various people, no one wanted to invest until I bumped into my cousin that night at Christmas dinner. And that was the first mead we produced, and the first commercially available maple mead was ours. And so, yeah, I don't want to say that's a signature mead, but it's certainly one of our flagships that we've always carried as we've grown. But yeah, maple mead is a phenomenal mead. It's really fun.
So we need to move on, and it's time to show the next slide, but I'm going to make a suggestion that you pour the better together and you take honey number 2, because what we're going to do now is we're going to sort of flip it over. We're going to taste the honey first, and then you and Ash will walk through the mead tasting again for each one. So the next one we're tasting is a Kiabe honey. For those of you who have traveled to the Big Island, you might have seen it. It's often a little whiter than this. This one seems to have a few other things. It's almost always crystallized. Please note, it is very crystallized. Nothing's pouring out of my cup. I don't know if yours is like this. This one can be anywhere from this color to absolutely pure white. Mesquite is Kiabe is actually mesquite. It was imported into the islands. It's an invasive plant. However, it also helps hold the shoreline together from problems. So they haven't eradicated it, but it's in very specific areas near the coast, near the Kona coast in Hawaii, on the Big Island. And that's where this particular honey comes from, is the Big Island. So when it's crystallized like this, it's a lot harder to smell. It's a lot harder to get all the volatiles operating. But if you smell this one, you're going to get, well, I don't know if people want to write in ideas. I can tell you what I get. I get sort of a candy aroma that's, boy, it's hard for me to name the candy. But I get
Mary Jane's.
Mary Jane's. There's a real hint of just that kind of effect. Now, if you stir it, you're not going to release too many volatiles because it's really, really thick. One of the things that Ash alluded to was single varietal honey, and how do you get that? So people often ask me, gee, how can you make sure that a honey is just that one honey? Well, you can't. And in this case, there's a little bit of lahua in here. I can taste it. You can't always ensure it, and sometimes you can taste it and sometimes you can't. Usually the predominant floral source overrides every single other thing. But a beekeeper who's trying to get a certain kind of honey, like that orange blossom in California, they will move their bees into the oranges just about a week before the bloom is going to hit. They open everything up and they let the bees do what they're going to do. And the bees go out and they tell each other, they fly out and there's all these oranges in bloom, and they come back to the hive and they do a tap dance, essentially telling everybody where to go. Now, remember, inside the beehive, bees aren't flying around, they're actually walking around. And so they do this tap dance that is like a Morse code kind of thing, and it is actually directional. So bees go back to the same area over and over and over and over again. And that's how you end up with a pure or close to a pure varietal. So you want to know beekeepers who are willing to work their bees this way. Then as soon as the flowers start to fade, the beekeeper needs to go into the field, close up the hives and remove the honey supers, not necessarily the bottom of the hive, but the top part where all the honey has been collected. So now we're going to taste this honey. And you should get, when there's all kinds of flavors going on, there's a fruitiness at the end that's very typical of Kiabe. And in this case, you've got a lot of butterscotch, a lot of milkiness. It's a little bit like toffee. It's got a lot of different things happening that are very, very creamy. And the texture is creamy. It's a nice fine crystal. One of the cool things about crystal is actually when they're crystallized, you're actually going to experience a cooling effect in your mouth. So it's sort of different. So taking that, we're now going into a mead that's been put into, is it an apple barrel?
This is an apple brandy barrel. Yep.
Right. So you're going to take it over from here. I don't know if there's questions down there. Should I be paying attention to some questions? Oh my God, there's 25 in the chat since I last looked.
So it's honey number two. Yep. Honey number 2.
Oh dear. So is there anything I need to be paying attention to?
No, I think most of it was about how to open the bottle.
Tastes a lot.
Rotate right, rotate
honey
left.
From Greece. Interesting. I don't have that one. I've not had pine tree honey from Greece. I have had it from Turkey, but never from Greece. You feel like well, so someone's talking about the crystals. In this case, the crystals are not rough. Sometimes the crystals are really, really rough on your tongue. And when you eat them, every single honey has a different, when it crystallizes is totally different. This is considered a pretty creamy one, but you're right, it's still crystals. So you're getting that. Now, your honey hasn't gone bad. Your honey has simply crystallized. Honey is a sugar. So when people say to me, oh, my honey's gone bad, it's turned to sugar. Well, I'm sorry, your honey is a sugar. It's a supersaturated sugar. And this is what it wants to always do. So don't be surprised by a crystallized honey. Just know that when you want to put it on your toast, it ain't going to spill all over the counter. So
please feel free to pour a glass of the better together. It is higher in ABV. You're certainly right. You're going to get a more alcoholic warming sensation from this one. A lot of that is picked up in your senses from the oak barrel and the brandy, but the mead itself is also pretty high. Someone just mentioned it's 15.6. If this is a successful tasting, yeah, that could happen.
They should maybe pour slightly smaller pours.
So this is the made with the honey that we just tasted. It is the Kiabe. And the reason that we do this, and it's one thing that sets us apart from a lot of meaderies that are out there, is I really geek out on pairing monofloral honey specifically to specific oak barrels and spirits. So we'll do blueberry blossom honey aged with another type of brandy barrel. This one I felt with those nutty notes that we were getting, the toasted sugars, I almost got like a little bit of almond, or the aroma, I got dry tea leaves. I personally feel like the two apple brandy and this honey was going to work really well together. the interesting thing about the meads that I've made tonight, I don't know what the end result will be when I start it. It's all theory and it's all kind of putting it together. It's a lot of hope, fingers crossed, and luck. But I have a general sense, tasting hundreds of honeys and making probably thousands upon thousands of gallons of mead. I have some idea, and I do love spirits, so I can get some sense of that. With this one, I just felt the two were going to work really well together, and I hope we'll all agree that is true.
So I pick up the fruitiness. I also I find that this is a really well-rounded mead in the sense that it is higher in alcohol, but it's not going to want me on the head. I do suggest that, I mean, someone wrote before and said, what's a normal pour? A normal pour is 4 ounces, and you're going to be walloped at the end if that's what you did. When I do a tasting, if I pour more than 1.5 ounces, it's a lot, because every single time I want my palate to be clean. So one of the problems, and someone mentioned, well, why does it taste so different when I tasted the honey and then tasted the mead? They do change, because the sweetness of the honey is going to affect the flavors that pass over your tongue immediately after.
And I've fermented most of those fermentable sugars in that honey.
Right. If you're tasting professionally, you're tasting in a controlled environment, in between every single taste, you're going to have either a sip of bubbly water to like clean your tongue. You're going to eat some green apple. You're going to have a piece of a plain cracker, something to absolutely clear it out, so you can constantly come back and taste as though it's brand new.
So I've got a few answers. I got to answer some questions here.
Yeah.
So do I ever make meads that have other things than honey, water, and yeast? Of course I do. Those are just the basic components of mead. From there, we do everything from full fruited meads with blueberries and blackberries and raspberries. We make tea meads. We love to experiment with all sorts of teas. I've done meads that are for cooking specifically. One was a mirepoix mead, which was literally the carrots, onions, celery. I think I did garlic and lemons and peppercorns. There's no limit to the styles of meads that you can make. And if you go onto our website, saphousemeadery.com, you'll always see a rotating list of what we have available online. And tonight, I just really wanted to pick some higher end styles of meads with these barrels, because they're really unique. You don't find, typically you don't find meads like this out there in the world. I'm gonna just bounce out of this so I can find my mouse again to answer a couple of these questions. Different yeasts, I always use different yeasts. I have my favorites. I do have, I love using D254. Lager yeast, not so much, only because I don't tend to use jacketed tanks that require a colder fermentation, but you can use lager yeast. I've done Kveik yeast. We have a hot box here where we hold our honeys to keep them at a pourable state, and I've fermented at 86 to 95 degrees with that style of yeast. Another question I've been asked is, why is it called Better Together? All of our barrel-aged meads that are monofloral all have a running theme. And Better Together is a Jack Johnson, part of a Jack Johnson song collection, and he's from Hawaii. So I picked from that, just utilizing an artist or a song based on the location, much like La Bamba is made with avocado blossom honey. So I tend to do that. We have a bourbon barrel-aged mead called One of These Days, which is one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs. But I tend to take music that I'm really passionate about and put it on there. I have we had a mead called Foam, which was metal foam honey, and we mixed that with New England style wildflower honey, and we produced a mead, and it was just a really fun, kind of a fun path for us to take. Let's see, are there ingredients in that honey that are sweet that are not fermentable? Amina could certainly speak to breaking that down. There are sugars that are not fermentable. one thing that keeps even some of the fermentable sugars that are there is, the attenuation of yeast and what their tolerances are on either the osmotic pressure of the yeast in its beginning when the water and honey are newly mixed, and then also the alcohol, as that is increasing in the batch. A lot of yeast can't tolerate higher alcohol and tend to fall out and slow down. And when they do that, they leave some of that honey or that sugar behind.
So in
Someone
terms
had some of
sorbitol
our
is not
other
a,
stars.
right, sorbitol is not present in honey as far as I know. The only sugars available, well, there are occasionally, if I'm maltose, there are some real lesser sugars that show up in tiny quantities, but the ones that are most common are glucose and fructose with a teeny bit of sucrose. Those are the most common sugars. The one thing I can tell you is that if some of you are playing around and you say, oh, my honey fermented, which it will do if it's got a high moisture content or water got into it, generally those yeasts that are making the honey ferment are not yeasts that are very good for making mead. They don't generally play nicely together, so you're going to end up with a mead that won't ferment properly. So don't go that route, even though it sounds like it should work. Should I answer the question about Manuka honey now? Yeah.
Let me answer the bottle thing first. So
okay.
this batch was specifically made for you months ago. Recently bottled. It is batch 1. I've never produced this mead before. I've never, while I've tasted Kiabe honey 1,000 times, I've never fermented it. And when I was out in California, one of the last times I was there pre-COVID, I fell in love with this honey, and I wanted to incorporate it. And I found the perfect time to do that, and that was for this event. So no, you all have batch 1, and those bottle numbers are truly the bottle. So this is specifically for this. We do have, I think I have maybe 2 cases left, but what you have there is like I tend to say, it's one of a kind. And a lot of times we don't repeat barrels. There are a few that we do, but for the most part, I like to keep them one-off. Sorry, Mina.
So a couple things. Someone wanted a little bit of history too. So mead is actually the world's oldest alcoholic beverage. It probably happened by accident over 8,000 years ago in China. And there has been research done on vessels where they can do that kind of stuff. That's what Patrick McGovern does a lot of that kind of work. It became popular because at that time they were able to make mead and they were able to make beer, but they weren't into doing grapes yet. Wine hadn't made its move from Georgia over, near the Black Sea into Europe at that moment. And so when it finally did, it was a lot cheaper to make wine than it was to make mead. So by the 1700s, mead starts to come out of popularity, by the 1600s actually, and wine is building up and becoming more popular. So this is a rebirth of the world's oldest known alcoholic beverage. If that helps with a little bit of back history. We'll hear about mead mostly, even in something like Shakespeare, which someone mentioned, you hear about it, but it's really more fanciful than in common use at that time. So someone wanted to know about Manuka honey, which comes from New Zealand, but actually, much to your amazement, maybe you didn't know that it's native to Australia. However, it's the tea tree. It grows in California also, though no one is collecting honey off of it. There's not enough of it. There's not enough profusion. You need acres and acres of any given plant to actually create a single varietal. Manuka is expensive because New Zealand has done their homework. They know that it can, they have put a lock on the name Manuka so that in Australia they can't use the term. There is more Manuka honey produced in the world or sold in the world than is produced in New Zealand, which means that a lot of it is adulterated or cut. The reason it became, it's medicinal. If you've ever had it, it tastes a lot like cough syrup. It's some people say they love it. I always think that when someone tells me they love Manuka, they just feel like they should. It's not really, it's like, it's got a mixture of bitter blackstrap molasses It's really like when people say just drink your medicine, it's good for you, it doesn't taste great. That's sort of where Manuka lands. But it also is one of the few honeys that they've done all the research on. It has one characteristic in particular, so that if it's irradiated for use in wounds and things like that, and all honey will work on burns and brush burns, Manuka doesn't lose any of its characteristics. Other honeys will lose those characteristics, but it's a limited amount that's produced, and New Zealand has creatively learned how to charge more for it. And that's pretty much why that did happen. Ready?
Thank you.
Is there more stuff we have to pay attention to?
No, I think we're good. Don't be dissing Moxie.
What'd you say?
That's awesome. They said so. It tastes like Moxie.
Well, I don't like the way it tastes. It doesn't mean if I was going to choose a honey to have as a honey, it wouldn't be Manuka. Oh
no, go ahead. Sorry.
Am I answering? Don't be dissing Moxie. Oh, sorry. Okay. So should we move on?
It's all good. Before you do, Amina, I just want to say, looking at this honey wheel, you're going to see there are some things on here that don't sound so great. And these, like Amina said, these are all things that they found while they were doing their tasting and sensory. But it's really important to note, like, just because it's on here, it doesn't mean it's great, but it does also, oftentimes that honey still has a play in making mead. The one that I'm specifically talking about is like cat pee. That doesn't sound good at all. I know that honey. It's oftentimes found in more like Eastern buckwheat in high concentration. And while I wouldn't make a mead that's 100% Eastern buckwheat honey, it's not so bad if you cut it and you break it down. It's just a really concentrated flavor of that. It's not that mead would turn out that way. But again, using this as your kind of verbal cue, your sensory cue, it doesn't always mean it's all rose petals and puffy clouds.
So the other thing about that you just mentioned, but particularly with buckwheat honey, because buckwheat is common in all over the Northeast, and it has a very strong goaty kind of flavor to it. It can have the cat pee smell. It's not the only one that does. There's a few that do, actually. I'm always surprised. But if you let it, it's very, very sweet. And if you can let it ferment for a long period of time, it actually will become, all the Polish meads are made with many of the Polish meads are made with buckwheat honey. And all they are is sweet. You won't pick up any of that odd flavor. So there's someone, no, can't be, but I love buckwheat honey. Well, sorry, you can love that buckwheat honey. It's probably what you grew up on. I can remember when we did the honey wheel and I was being interviewed by Allison Aubrey, and she was telling me her favorite honey was buckwheat honey. And she said, but my kids don't like it. And I said, have you ever stopped to like get out of your head of your childhood? Because what she remembers is in their summer, they had some summer cabin, and they go to the beekeeper down the road and they'd buy the honey from the beekeeper. So she's got this incredible story behind her buckwheat honey, which is making her love her buckwheat honey, which she should. Buckwheat honey, there are lots of people who love buckwheat honey. But what's really funny is she couldn't hear that her children just couldn't like it because they kept saying, Mom, it smells so yucky. And, she wasn't picking that up at all because all she had was this wonderful image of her childhood. So one of the things to remember when you're tasting, and this is something that sensory scientists deal with all the time, is that the smells that you have, first of all, you, believe it or not, you smell as well as a dog. We just don't train ourselves to do that. However, we have an incredible memory bank for smell. And if you had an experience that was positive with a smell when you were a child, that will carry through. And it takes a long time sometimes for that flavor to come up or that aroma to come up. And you'll be sitting there going, oh, I get it. Bubble gum. It smells like bubble gum, or, something weird will pop out and you'll be so shocked. But it's true. It's actually just the way it is. You know, you have to, everybody is different. Nobody tastes the same. There is a general perspective, but not a specific perspective. By the way, I talk a lot.
Well, let's go on to the next honey.
Okay. So this next honey is a real, whoops, do you want to pull it up there?
Yep. Oop.
Great.
Sorry.
Oop. Wait, where'd it go? There it is. So this is an avocado. Now, I've specifically said that it's from Southern avocado because, or Southern California, because there are avocado honeys that come from different parts of the country, and they all taste different. And it's important to know that they are going to taste quite differently. So avocado, which actually, believe it or not, is closely related to a blackberry, always blows me away when I do this kind of research. Avocado from Florida is very, very dark. Tastes like blackstrap molasses, has a lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of licorice going on in it, a lot of that dark flavors we associate with making winter fruits and vegetables like pies and things. From Mexico, it's not too dissimilar. It's usually a little lighter in flavor, very molassesy, and often very, very dark. This one comes from Southern California. I made my son hold out on buying avocado until we could find this kind of avocado honey because it's so wonderfully unique. You're going to find that it's very, very fruity, just like the avocado in its own way. When you taste an avocado, it's creamy and fruity all at once. So I'd like you to open it up and smell it. Notice that the color is really kind of, it's what's called a light amber. Normally it's much darker. If you were to put it on top of something white, you're going to see a lot of red in it, almost like mahogany. It's a really beautiful color. And I love looking at it on white. So Ash, what are you smelling?
So it's interesting. I get a lot of great fruit characteristics. I'm getting, I don't know if it's just me and having a few of these honeys tonight, but I'm getting fruit leather. I'm getting apricot.
I hope everyone who's tasting it is starting to salivate because it's real high in acid, just like anything that's fruity is high in acid. So that you're going to get like a little, you're going to start salivating and you're going to feel it under your tongue. So it's funny, every now and then I just say, oh God, I love this.
Yeah,
really,
I fell in love with this honey the first time I tasted it.
Right, so it's got a lot of berry in it. You can taste that. It's berry general, you know, I don't mean like you're tasting a specific berry. It's more like if you were thinking about what a berry flavor is, you get a little bit of that. There's a little bit of the licorice behind it. One of the lingering flavors in there is that licorice flavor. It's really a unique flavor. And it's the reason I held out to get a California avocado. So now let's move on to this mead, which is quite remarkable.
So again, continuing the way that I wanted to pair these together, I wanted to bring the fruitiness. It only was coincidence that it's avocado and a mezcal barrel. It wasn't really about any geographical, fruit and spirit, but it worked out because that fruit forward characteristic is what I fell in love with. And I am like the size of my mouth right now are salivating big time from that honey. But I knew that would play really well with the mezcal barrel, adding a little smoke to it. Now, I took a chance because I didn't know any of you. I don't know. I know some of you, of course, but I don't know what you all like to drink. I hope you enjoy things for what they are. But it has a little smoke to it, and sometimes that can be a little much for people. But I feel like we pulled off the mead out of that barrel just in time to where that smokiness helps elevate that fruitiness of the honey. So I welcome us all. I see that we're all tasting it and smelling it and enjoying. Smelling banana, that's interesting. I can actually understand that. Yeah.
I just find this mead really wonderful. I'm going to drink 4 ounces. It's going to be this one.
Cheers to the scientists.
I'm not a scientist. You know, I taste the banana in the mead now that it's been, someone mentioned it. I can.
Yes, it's super interesting.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if that's an effect of having the honey right before the mead. Because I didn't taste that last night.
They're calling you a scientist, Amina. You're definitely.
I do love the way the fruit comes through, the honey comes through on this is really interesting. I love the way the smokiness kind of almost blends and braids with the honey. It's like, oh, it's really cool.
With the smoke, I think it kind of lends itself to a little bit of that savory side. You get spice, you get a little bit of like raisin, dried fruit. I get a little bit of that in there with that smokiness as well.
And that's all characteristic of avocado too.
Interesting, yeah.
Different avocados are going to taste. This one, it tends to be lighter fruit, but a lot of them will go into that dried fruit, figgy, date-like kind of taste.
Someone mentions pipe smoke. When I first sampled this before pulling it out of the oak barrel, I looked at my production manager and I said, if you added cherries and vanilla to this, it would smell like that old man that smoked pipes down in the corner. Because it does have that pipe tobacco kind of nuance to it. I get that.
I actually think this honey would be, this mead would be terrific with almost any cheese. You know, so I don't think it has to be a smoked cheese. I think actually, trying to think what's sitting in my, I almost put a cheese out today. I was just thinking that, what one do I have that would taste really good with this?
I think I mentioned it in a previous note to Kevin. This one with like a really crystally cave-aged cheddar would just be awesome. I would sit down with that and probably finish it. Banana flambe. There you go.
So who's doing the investigation into honey and sensorially? That's a great question. I guess at this point, we're really just into questions in general. So what's going on with the center right now is a number of years ago, I started sensory research on 3 American honeys. There has been sensory research done, particularly in Italy is really well known for it. They've done some in South America on certain honeys. They're starting up in India. Different countries are doing this, but there has been no interest to do the honeys of America from any of the packers or the beekeepers or the National Honey Board. So anything I do like that, I am pretty much on my own, and it's quite costly to do multiple levels of research. So when you do it, you need, I mean, in this day and age, you need to use gas chromatography. That's one grad student. HPLC is another grad student. NMR is another grad student, and pollen analysis. And then that doesn't even start with the people who are tasting it, your tasting panel, who has to be trained, and then going in through through all of the different honeys that you're doing. So, however, this year I have some money in an account that was designed to start to do research, and we're going to be doing in-person honey tasting of 5 varietals, 3, I think we're going to do 5 California varietals, focus on California. and see if we can drum up some interest to get further funding for research. But it's quite expensive. Like, you want to run it over several years. You can't do more than 5 or 6 honeys a year and get all the way into it. So it gets a little costly. I hope that explains. But right now I'm the only one doing it in the country.
So I just want to see if there's some questions I missed. Margaret's mentioning the apple pie and blueberry pie mead. So we're, a couple of the meads that we make are our pie series. I think we're one of the only wineries in the country that have some permission to add oats to our honey or to our meads rather. And we've done meads that taste just like those pies, including the crust itself with using toasted oats. And it's amazing. We really do enjoy making a lot of different flavors. These meads tonight, I really wanted to highlight the importance of the mead itself, but also the honey. I thought it would be really fun to partner up with Amina and let her share her story and what she does, because a lot of people don't know monofloral honey. They see orange blossom on the shelf or clove on the shelf, and that's pretty much where that ends. And most people don't even know really what that means. And so I hope you all got a little piece of something out of that. Continuing on our story with the mead and the mead side, we have a ton of great barrel-aged meads that are going right now. We've got maple blossom honey being fermented and aged in a barrel. I'm not going to throw too many secrets out there, but that one's really, really coming along nicely. I actually, in the beginning of this, when Kevin had reached out to me, I had in my mind 4 meads that I'd like to put forward, and they all kind of dictate to me when they're done. You have to be very flexible in mead making, and it doesn't operate on a calendar. It doesn't operate with a cookie cutter. And so I put 4 meads together that I wanted to introduce to all of you, and in hopes that I could get 2 or 3 out of them. And I did. The La Bamba kind of came out of left field for me. It was just speaking to me that it was ready. I hope you've all enjoyed that, because that mead is really fun. And again, you'll see they're all batch ones. I have never made these meads before. They're the first you guys are the first to try them and chat about them as well. Margaret's mentioning the trees. The trees was a maple mead. I got to remember this. It was a maple mead aged in oak. Oh, it had another tree in there that we did. Now I'm forgetting what it was. That was a great mead though. One of these days, Willen is another great mead. We have one that's, someone had asked earlier what my oldest aged mead is, and it's still going right now. My son's name is Ethan, and when he was born in April of 2017, I found my favorite honey. It's Japanese knotweed honey. It's from an invasive species plant here, also known as bamboo. But the bees love it. I love the honey. It can range from a light brown to a dark red. I found what I could find is, in my opinion, the best batch. And I fermented that out and I aged it in a rum barrel. It went in the barrel in July of 2017. And it's in that barrel to this day, and it's going until he turns 21. We top it off every probably 18 to 24 months, just because it keeps soaking into the barrel and there's evaporation, so we keep adding to it. But the goal there is to go a full 21 years with that, with not taking some out and adding more. It's going to be a single batch, 21 years, and hopefully that will pay for his college. I'm just kidding. He might get a bottle.
Well, so I'm sitting here about to write a really long answer, and I think maybe it's easier if I just answer this question. So just to give you an idea, that when bees go out collecting nectar, they are, whatever they collect in the nectar is what gets stored and changed into honey. It is a process. You have to understand that bees have 2 stomachs. One is called their honey stomach, and one is what they actually eat from. If they are in need of immediate food, they will eat some of that nectar right away, and it goes right into their stomach. If it is something that's going to be saved and used in the hive later, it goes into their honey stomach, and it will get mixed with some enzymes there, and those enzymes will affect how the flavor. It affects the flavor of the honey slightly, but pretty much what the bees collect is what the honey tastes like. So a really good orange blossom honey has this incredible floral aroma that is a mix between jasmine, orange blossoms. If it's really, really a good one, when you taste it, you're going to get a hint of like candied orange peel. There's a lot of different things that happen, but all the bees have done is collect that honey and then store it. So it isn't that the bees themselves affect the flavor. That shouldn't happen. So it is actually what the bees collect that make it taste the way it tastes, which is why there's so many. There are about 300 different varietals from all over the United States. And that includes, I mean, you guys are from all over the place. The person from Sacramento might be able to get some yellow star thistle. Folks up in Oregon are going to get meadow foam and raspberry and blueberry and blackberry. People in the Northeast get blueberry. People up in Michigan get blueberry. And they all taste, they really do all taste different. And that's something to constantly be paying attention to. From the Southeast, you get mesquite, you get cactus. On the coast, we get eucalyptus. It's just all over the place. And they all do taste dramatically different. So someone did mention what were my credentials. I don't have a degree in sensory science. My degree is actually in special education. So at the same time I was running Z Specialty Food, I was also a teacher. My husband did most of the work, but I did all the flavor, art, design, etc. I've been in the honey industry for over 40 years. And I have learned how to taste and select varietal honey along the way. So that's sort of what my background is. There aren't many people who have this kind of background without all the other stuff that goes with it. Do bees visit wheat or corn plants? They don't go to wheat. There's no real flour that they can get to. They're forced to go to corn occasionally. They get pollen from it. It's very mild. It's not a good nutritional plant for them. Sometimes they're forced into pollinating that, which is what happens a lot with commercial beekeeping, is bees are forced into areas they don't necessarily naturally feed on. And that would be one of them, would be corn. It would not be corn is predominantly wind pollinated, as are grapes and olives and a whole lot of other things. Honeybees and native bees and other pollinators pollinate about a third of what you eat. Everything else is generally wind pollinated.
We had a question from Vincent. Vincent, go ahead.
Thank you. Excellent presentation, everything. Apologies for folks outside of New England. How far are you from Boston by car? That's my first question. The second, is your place like a destination place? Like you have skiers stop by in the wintertime and hikers in the summertime? Just more about your location.
Yeah, great question, Vincent. Thank you for joining us tonight. So yeah, we're about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, depending on which side of the city you're on. Yeah, we're just outside. There are folks putting some information up. We're just east of Wolfboro, just about 35 minutes south of North Conway. This whole area is a bit of a destination area. It's very tourist driven. We've got lakes, mountains, we've got skiing, we've got hiking. There's so much to do here in the area. And you know, we welcome everyone to come up. We're open right now. We're open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we do tours every Saturday. We welcome you all to come up, and you can get your tickets right online at saphousemeadery.com. And you come in and you get a tour with either myself or with Matt. Matt's my cousin and business partner. And what we do with those tours is we do a quick tasting, give the history while you're tasting those. Then we walk out in the production area and I show you, or he shows you how we make it and where we make it. We love taking questions. We love interactivity. And then we go back out and we sample a few more flavors as well. And of course, we always have bottles here from time to time that are a bit of a surprise that we don't advertise online. I think right now we've got about 15 flavors, give or take. But we rotate in and out. We've made a total of, I think, 60 different flavors. But yeah, there's always something to do around here, to come up, visit us. And Margaret's mentioning the club. I have to give a shout out to Margaret. Margaret's been a club member of ours for many years. Geez, I couldn't even tell you how long. I'll have to go back and look, Margaret. But thank you so much for sparking this tonight. Margaret is actually the reason I'm here. And Amina's here that we're chatting, but we do a club. It's $75 a quarter. You get 4 bottles and that includes shipping. And they're usually first release bottles, meaning Club Mead members get first dibs. It's not always like a batch one like you've received tonight, but sometimes it is. Club members always do get first dibs on bottles that we release when it's not a quarterly release. And, we ship to, I think, 43 states in the country now. You always get 15% off your purchases, and typically during a release period, you get 25 to 30% off that you can add to your box and enjoy that free shipping. So it's a great way to get meads to your house. The club is great. If you think you can, enjoy a bottle a month, that's pretty much what it's good for. And it's a great way to save money doing so.
So I'd like to just jump in because I'm not here to present my business in the same way that Ash is presenting his, but we also have a tasting room. And we have our honeys, and we do fruit spreads, nut butters, and honey fruit spreads. We've won several national awards with our products, and also our honey line. But we also are doing something that isn't happening in too many other honey tasting rooms. And that is what we got ourselves an alcohol permit, and we are tasting mead in our tasting room. So, which meant that we also have to have a restaurant. But we actually serve Sap House mead along with several other meaderies. So on the West Coast, it's a way of getting to know that. This has been a vision of our family for years. My husband always used to say, I want to have a honey museum on I-5. And unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago, but my son and myself and my daughter have made this happen. And so if you're driving up and down the coast and you're on I-5, and you get to Woodland, it's a tiny little town, but you should stop in and you can order everything and go online. We've got little cards. And if you don't seem to have the card, I will be glad to send you out the contact information. But I'd love to meet you and see you all. And we've been doing this for 40 years. Someone asked if we were beekeepers and sold our own honey. My husband was a beekeeper actually until about a year before he got sick and passed away. He was a beekeeper. He started in Israel and kept bees in our backyard the entire time we were married. My kids both know how to keep and do keep bees. And we'll be having two beehives up at the warehouse probably next spring. It's taken us a while to get everything going. Our facility is brand new. When you see the next slide, you'll see the picture of it. We just built it. It's a net zero facility using a lot of the latest in what's going on in the world.
And Amina's being very humble. Her places are amazing. I have yet to be to the hive, but I have watched their building of it, and it is absolutely outstanding. I've done a few different courses at UC Davis in Amina's programs, and it's some of the best education I've ever had in my life. And when you go out there, visit her Z Specialty Foods, and it's insane. She has the best honey. If you go to zspecialty.com, zspecialtyfoods.com, you won't be disappointed with the quality and the types of honey, the amount of types of honey that she has. They are just absolutely amazing. So through the years and years of making mead, Amina is the best at what she does when it comes to honey in this industry. So that comes with my seal of approval for sure. And again, she does have a card here. I hope you all found it in your box. It is a small card, but really go to their website and check out their honeys. Some of them are just outstanding. I highly recommend, if you want some different styles toy on, I recommend the California Star Thistle. And I'm digging the Snowberry lately. There's a really fun mead.
Yeah, that is a nice one. A couple others that people like lately are the one that's gaining in popularity all over the country for anyone who can find it and sell it is Meadow Foam, which sort of tastes like cupcakes coming out of the oven, kind of marshmallowy and toasty.
Marshmallow.
And then, well, I go through stages. Right now I'm into coriander. I like cooking with coriander a lot, so that's always important. But there was a question in here that I missed. I wanted to go back and see it. Someone mentioned something. Oh, they want to know about Ethiopian tej. Tej is actually made with an herb that it's a honey wine specifically made with a specific herb. And yeah, thank you. And so it is also considered a mead. One of the, going back in that history concept, one of the things people don't understand is that a lot of the drinks that we have today were always sweetened with honey, and they were called meads originally, including apple cider or any cider, which was originally cider and was made with mead and apples, or with honey and apples. And it was one thing. And then I'm trying to remember what the other really old one is that went out. Oh, beer was always made with honey, or frequently made with honey, not always.
So I've got a couple questions here as well. The discount code, can it be used towards the Mead Club? It can't be used towards to get the release and join the club. It's just for the 4 or more bottles, you get 25% off, which is actually better than the Club Mead discount. The Club Mead, if you would like to join, is $75 a quarter. We just kind of keep that going every quarter. But no, the discount doesn't apply to that, just because that includes shipping and all of that. I mean, there's really a low margin thing for us. It just allows us to produce wonderful meads for a very specific set of people. And those people are typically our biggest fans. So we have to take care of our biggest fans as best we can. But you can apply it to other purchases. That's right, Margaret. Yeah. I thought I saw another question here too. Oh, the aging. So yeah, with our meads and most meads in general, but I'll speak of mine specifically. If they're unopened, we use 100% cork. So they're not glued or agglomerated. They are a one-piece cork. They're oftentimes the best you can get. And if you are going to age them longer than, say, 8 months, 6 or 8 months, I do recommend aging them on their side or upside down. A cool space is always best, out of sunlight. Cellar temps are just fine. They don't freeze easily, and I wouldn't worry too heavily about that. Once they're opened, you're good for a couple weeks. There's no issues there. They don't turn to vinegar or things like that as other wines do. And then if you use those vacuums that I spoke about earlier, it's almost indefinitely. They're very shelf stable, so no issues there. If you age mead and you're going to age them out long term, you will notice significant differences. The complexities kind of start forming. The sharp edges of being young, say 6 months, is still a young mead, even though it's very drinkable. They start to soften and complexities form, and a lot of the volatiles fall out. So they do age like any fine wines that are out there, and they do get better. So I highly recommend that. You might see at the bottom of my piece here on that screen, Hobbs Brewing Company and Hobbs Tavern. I own a couple other companies here in town, and it's a brew pub and production brewery. We've been around about 8 years now. And when you come up here, come visit us at all of the beverage manufacturing facilities that we've got. Let's see. It's a long one. I've been meaning to try making mead forever. Tonight has inspired me. Yes, I love that. jump right in with one of my favorite honeys. Yeah, I mean, you can. I think when you start out making mead, you can get paralysis by analysis. I think really simply, you determine if you want it to be sweet or dry, low alcohol or high alcohol, and then if you want it flavored, and just go from there. Just answer some really easy questions and get going. And you can always message us here at Sap House Meadery at info@saphousemeadery.com, right through our website. And I try to answer everybody's questions on fermenting. I am a huge proponent of educating the population about mead. And when people are interested in making mead, it's even more important to me because you're going to share it with your friends. And if you're going to share it with your friends, it needs to be really good. And that's important to me because it helps the industry grow. So I do my best to help out where I can, and feel free to follow up with any messages you have, and I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. What would
and never use an ordinary honey. Never use an ordinary honey.
Yeah, no.
Nowhere in your cooking, nowhere in your eating, don't use an ordinary honey. Make every honey you have in your house spectacular.
Yeah.
If you don't like, it's really okay to give it away or dump it. I hate to say that, but why would you eat something you don't really love?
If it doesn't taste that great, cook with it. I mean, there's other ways. There's other avenues. Normal cost of our bottles range. We have meads that are $15. We have 4 packs of canned meads that are carbonated, cold, and refreshing. $10, $12 a 4-pack. We have bottles at $15, and then we have bottles up to $30 and $35 for the 375. Yeah, making mead is wonderful. Amina actually runs courses. She has done a lot for the mead industry over the last 6 or 7 years that I've known her. She runs at the Robert Mondavi Institute out of the Honey and Pollination Center, the Mead 101, 201, and 301 classes. So I highly recommend going out, visiting Amina, joining up with her at one of her classes. There's always world-class mead makers there giving their spiels, and they utilize a lot of the school staff as well to contribute. They make mead there at the Robert Mondavi Institute, so you can go and see how they're doing it. And it's really fun. Amina has done amazing things for our industry.
So just so you know, Ash often teaches for me. He's one of those master mead makers that shows up.
We are distributed in Massachusetts by Berkshire Brewing Company. We always used to be at Mead Hall. I honestly haven't been there in quite some time for some obvious reasons, but it's always worth going in and finding out. It certainly, with a name like Mead Hall, they certainly should carry it. If there's a place that you frequent that doesn't carry it, ask for it. Customers are always listened to, vendors are not. It's one thing to have you go up and say, hey, I love shopping at your store, but I wish you carried Sap House. Then if it were me saying, hey, no, your customers will love this, you should buy my product. Yep, Gordon's, I think I opened that account in Watertown. We're also in the Whole Foods in Dedham. And yeah, we're in and around Boston. We have a lot of meads in North Shore. Oddly enough, North Shore folks love mead. It must have to do with Salem. The number 3 honey was the avocado.
Ash, there was a question about the membership, if you can pause that, or does it keep going continuously?
So when you sign up, it is continuous, but there's now a new feature that you can say how many orders you'd like. We always ask that you do 2. There's no, we don't hold anybody over the coals. If you want just one and you do that, that's fine. You can always pause it. You can always join back in. It's a very fluid thing, pun intended. It's a really great way to see what we're doing and be a part of a fun group of people.
Excellent. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the formal program. I have to express a little bit of frustration with you both, because you've given me yet another category of drink and yet another category of food that I need to explore. So I have to do more homework. Darn it.
Gee, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not getting an apology from me, pal.
I was going to say, does this guy want to look at my meat shelf?
I'd like to come out and sample it with you.
Yeah,
Probably ashes is better, but
Yeah, I
meat,
see
meat
you
and
guys-
honey. It drives the wife crazy.
Well, thank you both so much. It's been fantastic having you, and I hope everyone learned as much as I did at this awesome event. Thank you for joining. It would be great if everybody can stay and mingle. We're going to be doing breakouts randomly assigned. So Ash and Amina will be joining 2 lucky groups in our breakouts. We'll do that for about 15 minutes till about, I'm seeing like 8:52 p.m. East Coast time, and then we'll come back and just have a very informal session with Ash and Amina after that. So thank you all, and hope to see you in the breakouts.
Thank you all.
Thank you.